So this is a paper called Four Theses on Being. It relates to a book I just finished called Unity and Aspect, and that should be coming out soon enough. But rather than deal immediately and directly with issues of negation, I thought I would take up questions of ontology and negation in relation to ontology. Doesn't it seem strange, then, that ontology, and thus any negative ontology, has remained fundamentally the same from the Greeks to us? This relates to a comment that Hegel made about logic, referencing Fabian's question about the relation between Aristotle and Hegel, because Hegel said, isn't it strange that logic from Aristotle to Kant remained fundamentally the same? His response was, yes, it's strange, and it's an indication that logic is in need of total revision. Today, ontology, it seems to me, still means the study or science of being, of toon, heon, the episteme of being qua being. But what is being? In order to reply to this question, and so also to any question regarding meon, privation, non-being, or nothing, negativity, or negation, we shall sketch out four theses on being. First, being has been understood in terms of things, even as a thing, albeit a special kind of thing, with a particular matter and form. And for this way of seeing things, if it is not a thing, then being is meaningless, empty. The word of an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. Pure indeterminacy, indefinite and indefinable. Hence the slogan of phenomenology, as much as the dominant culture of our age, including, one might say, the dominant philosophy of certain strains of Oxford, Cambridge, and some American universities, the dominant strain of some parts of the culture of our age, away from this empty word being, toward particular beings. And yet, not only do we still seem to somehow be, as do words and deeds, thoughts and things, something and nothing, but the meaning of being seems to remain unaddressed. This is the thesis that dominates from the pre-Socratic material philosophers to contemporary natural science. Being is substance. To be is to be a particular kind of thing made up of a particular kind of thing. Things come into being and go out of it because of modifications in the hupokaimenon, or they come to presence and absence thanks to the essential substratum. So, whether he is young or old, ugly or beautiful, whether he presents himself as knowing or knowing that he does not know, is present to us here and now or no longer, and so there and then, Socrates himself remains the same. And in truth, nothing comes to be or ceases to be. Nothing is affirmed or negated, confirmed or denied, for there must be something, or things, whether we call them atoms, quarks, bosons, or fire and water, that is continuously present, underlying all things. The limits of this way of understanding being qua thing are, for us, quickly apparent. And there's no way to explain why there is something rather than nothing, nor why there is something that is as it is and not in another way. And if it's possible, to observe more or less precisely that things come into being and go out of it, such an understanding of being cannot tell us how so. Then we can measure the motion of things more and more precisely, of course, which is the important thing, and that we get the money to do so, the speed at which they change, formally or materially, but cannot determine a priori that it must be so. And although we might translate being into the language of things, a translation in which we would presumably be implicated, this does not necessarily mean that we have illuminated it, nor that it is a measurement or a measurable thing. Indeed, to paraphrase Augustine, ask me what a thing is, I can tell you. But ask me what is, I am at a loss. Second, being has been understood as origin, whether at the beginning or end, or both, arche and telos. But when it comes to illuminating its originality, the history of ontology, from the Greeks to the present, resorts to something other than being. They call it nature, number, good, God, or the gods, substance, reason, spirit, etc. In this way, being is identified with nature, or number is assumed to be the essence of things, or the idea of the good is the beginning and end of everything, or God or substance is all that there is, or all things are rational, etc., etc. Take your pick. And then, being is originally not merely some kind of informed matter or thing, nor is it just a fiction or idea in the mind of one or many or all subjects. It is what Plato names epikena te sousias, not only that which is beyond all things, but essentially beyond being, and yet somehow present in them, so that they can be, present themselves, come to exist, and cease to do so, or go out of being into absence. And insofar as this origin is determinative for that and how, the das and the wie, as Kant would put it, how that and how things are, their existence and essence, their actuality and potentiality, necessity and possibility, it is not just that out of which they present themselves. For it's just as much present in them, in the presenting. Indeed, it is their presence, even the event, of any kind of presencing whatsoever, and so of absence or absenting as well, which is why it is constitutive for our experience and knowledge of anything whatsoever. But the limits of being qua origin, that from which everything comes or towards which everything goes, these limits are also clear enough. For explaining being by what it is not merely defers the problem of what it is, just as discovering the origin of the origin implies an ever more original one. So, if being is substance, well, what is substance? Etc., etc. Or if being is an origin in the sense that it has always been, what kind of origin could being then be? For the originality of being could not, as Aristotle reminds us, that of a predicate, whether linguistic or logical, at least insofar as both being and things are, have being, and it is not possible to predicate being of both. Or as Kant puts it, being is not a real predicate. For its universality is more universal than any definition or word or concept, attribute or quality. Being is wider than any special or generic difference, greater than any form or matter, vaster than any position or relation of things or to themselves, as well as smaller than any distance, even that of the self-presence or self-identity of a thing to itself, or its non-self-presence, absence, withdrawal, proximity, especially if all these things somehow are as well. Yet being neither more nor less, neither more potential than actual, neither more possible than necessary, being still seems to be neither nothing nor not nothing, and so something. For nothing as well, that which is not, or its negation, may have to be somehow, at least if it is, and is not nothing, and tertium non datur. So, even if being is originally universal, it would be difficult to explain how it belongs to things, or how it is present in particular individuals or absent therefrom, without losing its universality, or implying something even more universal. Or to illuminate how things come to presence through what they are not, at least insofar as each thing is not being itself. Third, then, roughly 5 minutes per thesis, you see, moving along so we can get to the buffet. Third, being has been understood in terms of presence. Being is not the matter of things, not the existence of bosons, nor their non-existence. It is their presence in this thing, in the universe. It's not the wood of trees or beds, but the fact that trees live and breathe, or that they are cut down for beds. Being is not the possible or necessary meaning of words or concepts, but that one word has a meaning, or that the concept is present in the thought of the equation. Whatever equation, E equals mc squared. For the reference is there in the sign. Nor is being the beginning or end of deeds, done or undone, but the presence of beginning and or end therein. It's not our essence, whether daimon or rational animal, soul or cogito, transcendental apperception, or even its own existence, but that and how the essence is present in us. And so, it's not the origin of things, but rather the presence of the origin in things. As Heidegger reminds us, this is before he refers to the truth and greatness of National Socialism, which is a topic we'll leave to the side for now. I quote, "A definite unitary trait runs through all these meanings. It points our understanding of to be toward a definite horizon by which the understanding is fulfilled. The boundary drawn around the sense of being stays within the sphere of presentness and presence." But once again, the limits of this understanding of being qua presence, are clear. For the other of presence, its negation, or beschränkung, also implies being. That which is absent also is absent. Even absence itself, even if it is not simply present. But if this way of thinking about being, that of presence, has been privileged, indeed, if it has been normalized into a philosophy of presence that dominates in the present age, it's not simply because it is true. On the contrary, it is perhaps far more a sign that ontology is in need of total revision. And yet, this cannot merely take the form of a negation of ontology, a negative ontology, like some kind of negative theology. For such a superficial strategy just repeats the metaphysical tradition in reverse, while leaving its essential presuppositions intact. Rather, insofar as the future of ontology, as well as any possible negation thereof, is at stake, the task might be to think that which cannot be contained within the usual economy of being and non-being, present and absent, affirmative and negative, something or nothing. It is therefore perhaps somewhat fortuitous that at the start of the 21st century, a fourth thesis with respect to being has come to light. Being is not things as they present themselves, nor is it merely an origin that continues to be present in anything whatsoever. For being is not a question of presence. Rather, being is implied. It is an implication. And how being is determinative for that it is and what it is. Then if a thing is, or is not, is present or absent, a word or deed, thought or thing, it's because being is implied. Or, if there is something rather than nothing, or nothing rather than something, it's because being is not something or nothing. It's an implication. And this is how being can implicate itself in anything whatsoever. In our way of feeling or imagining, thinking, speaking, and acting. This is why Heraclitus can say, ethos anthropodaimon. Or Keats can write, truth is beauty, beauty truth. We immediately understand this in Russian, where we don't need the word to be, the verb to be, to speak. We are not the first to understand this. Certainly the Greeks understood this well before us. And it's for this reason that we speak and think, experience and feel. That which presents itself comes to presence or goes out into absence. For being is implicated in us too, in our way of presenting ourselves, whether we are one of those things we call a self or not. Being is implicated in the matter of trees, the form they take, their way of being born and living and dying. It's implicated by the beds we build from their wood and what we do therein, for being is an implication and so just implied. Thus, the fourth thesis on being seems to imply a threefold question. If being is implied by anything whatsoever, how does it show itself, if it does, in speech and action, thoughts and things? How is it possible or necessary for being to have been translated into the language of matter and form, origin and end, presence and absence, rather than that of implication? What does it mean for ontology, and so metaphysics, ethics, aesthetics, even philosophy as a whole, to take up the task of illuminating that which is just implied? And is this a problem we can solve or not? Thank you.